The millionaire told the poor waitress. "Miss, that ring belonged to my late wife." The millionaire froze at what she said. The morning shift at Rosie's Café always started the same way. With burnt coffee and dishes clattering in the back, Claire Dawson tied her apron for what felt like the 1000th time that month, her fingers moving on autopilot while her mind wandered somewhere darker, somewhere that smelled like antiseptic instead of stale coffee. "Claire, table 7 needs a refill," Tommy shouted from the register. "Got it," she called back, grabbing the coffee pot with hands that had stopped shaking from exhaustion months ago. She was 23 years old and felt 50. The cafe wasn't much. Scuffed floors, vinyl booths with duct tape holding cracks together, windows that hadn't been properly cleaned in years. But it paid the bills, barely. And barely was all she had. As she refilled cups and took orders, Claire's right hand caught the morning light. The silver ring on her finger gleamed for just a moment, a spark of something beautiful in an otherwise gray world. It was the only piece of jewelry she owned. Her mother had given it to her 5 years ago. On her 18th birthday, Claire could still remember sitting on the edge of her mom's bed, the sound of traffic outside, the way Isabella's hands trembled as she slipped the ring onto Claire's finger. "This was from the man I loved," her mother had whispered, tears streaming down. "The only man I ever loved. He gave this to me when we were going to get married. What happened to him, Mom?" "He died, sweetheart, a long time ago, before you were born." Isabella touched Claire's cheek with a hand that felt too thin. "But this ring, it's proof that real love existed, that you came from something beautiful." Claire had worn it every single day since, through double shifts and bill collectors, and nights when she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering how to pay for her mother's medications. The ring never came off. It was her anchor, her reminder that once, before the sickness and struggle, there had been love. "Order up." Claire delivered plates to a family whose kids smeared syrup everywhere. She cleared tables, refilled glasses, and pretended she wasn't thinking about the medical bills stacked on her counter at home. Bills that got higher every week. Her mother was dying. The doctors had made that clear 6 months ago, using terms like advanced stage and palliative care, words that basically meant there was nothing they could do without money. Money Claire didn't have and never would. Not on a waitress's salary in San Francisco. Isabella Dawson had been bedridden for 2 years. What started as fatigue had progressed into something the free clinic couldn't diagnose without expensive tests Claire couldn't afford. Now her mother could barely get out of bed. Some days she couldn't remember what year it was. Claire was watching her mother disappear piece by piece. "Hey, you okay?" Rosie appeared at her elbow, weathered face creased with concern. "Yeah, just tired." "You're always tired, honey. Working a double again." "Have to." "Mom's prescriptions need refilling." Rosie sighed. "You're gonna work yourself into an early grave. Better me than her." The lunch rush came and went. Claire's feet ached in her cheap sneakers. Her back throbbed from carrying heavy trays. But she kept moving because that's what you did when you didn't have a choice. By 2 o'clock, her phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen from next door. "Claire, honey, I'm sorry to bother you, but your mama had a bad spell. I heard her crying and checked on her. She's okay now, but I think you should come home when you can." Claire's stomach dropped. "What kind of spell? Should I call an ambulance?" "No, nothing like that. She just couldn't catch her breath, got real scared, but Claire..." Mrs. Chen's voice dropped. "She's getting worse, sweetheart." "I know." Claire's voice came out hollow. "I know she is." She hung up and stared at the phone. At the cracked screen she couldn't afford to replace. At the wallpaper photo of her and her mom from 3 years ago, back when Isabella could still smile without it looking like it hurt. The silver ring caught the light again. Claire twisted it around her finger. It was loose now. She'd lost weight, too stressed to eat properly, but she never took it off. "One day things will get better," her mother used to say when Claire was little. "One day something wonderful will happen." Claire had stopped believing in wonderful things a long time ago. She finished her shift in a daze, collected her tips, $43, and headed home on the bus. The sun set over San Francisco, painting the sky orange and pink. When she reached their apartment, she found her mother awake, propped up on pillows, staring at nothing. "Hey, Mom," Claire said softly, sitting on the bed. "Mrs. Chen said you had a rough day." Isabella turned her head slowly. "I saw him today." "Saw who, Mom?" "Him, the man from my dreams." The one who gave me the ring. Her fingers touched the silver band on Claire's hand. He's out there somewhere, Claire. I can feel it. Claire's heart broke a little more. The dementia was getting worse. Get some rest, Mom. I'm here now. But as she sat there in the dimness, listening to her mother's labored breathing, Claire knew nothing was okay, and she had no idea how to make it better. The ring felt heavier than usual, like it was waiting for something to happen. Claire didn't believe in signs or miracles, but somewhere deep down, in a place she'd locked away years ago, a tiny voice whispered, "What if? What if her mother's fairy tale was real? What if the man who gave Isabella that ring was still out there? What if there was still hope?" Claire shook her head and got up to heat soup for dinner. Fairy tales didn't come true, not for people like her. But tomorrow morning, she'd put on that apron again. She'd pour coffee and smile at strangers, and she'd wear that silver ring, just in case. The next morning came too early, like it always did. Claire dragged herself out of bed at 5:30, checked on her mother, still sleeping, thank God, and caught the first bus downtown. The city was just waking up, streetlights flickering off as the sky turned from black to gray to that pale blue that meant another day of survival was about to begin. She unlocked Rosie's Café at 6, flipped the sign to open, and started the first pot of coffee. The familiar routine was almost meditative, measuring grounds, filling the machine, wiping down counters. Her hands knew what to do even when her brain was still half asleep. By 7, the morning regulars had started trickling in. Mr. Peterson with his newspaper and black coffee, the construction crew that always ordered the breakfast special, Jenny from the bookstore next door, who liked her eggs scrambled and her bacon crispy. Claire moved through it all like a ghost, pouring and serving and smiling on autopilot. She was refilling the sugar dispensers when the bell above the door chimed. She glanced up out of habit and felt something shift in the air. The man who walked in didn't belong here. That was the first thing she noticed. Everything about him screamed money, from the tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Claire made in 6 months, to the watch on his wrist that caught the light like it was made of actual diamonds. He was maybe mid-40s, tall, with dark hair graying at the temples and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so. Hollow. That was the only word for it. He looked hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left just the shell behind. "Sit anywhere you'd like," Claire called out, trying not to stare. He chose a booth by the window, the one with the best view of the street, and sat down heavily like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Claire grabbed a menu and headed over, slipping into her customer service smile. "Morning. Can I start you off with some coffee? Please." His voice was deep, rough around the edges. "Tired," she poured, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands rested on the table like he'd forgotten what to do with them. This was a man who hadn't slept well in a very long time. "I'll give you a minute to look at the menu. Just the coffee is fine. You sure? We make a mean omelet?" "I'm not hungry. Thank you." It wasn't rude, exactly. Just defeated. Claire nodded and started to turn away when it happened. The morning sun, which had been hiding behind clouds, suddenly broke through. A beam of light streamed through the grimy window and hit her hand, the hand holding the coffee pot, the hand with the silver ring. The ring blazed like it was on fire. She heard the man suck in a breath, heard the scrape of the booth as he jerked forward. She looked down and saw him staring at her hand like he'd seen a ghost. "That ring," his voice came out strangled. "Where did you get that ring?" Claire's heart started pounding for no reason she could explain. It was my mother's. She gave it to me." He stood up so fast, the table shook. The coffee cup rattled in its saucer. His face had gone completely white. No, that's not possible." He was breathing hard now, his hands shaking as he reached toward her. "That ring, my God, that's impossible. Sir, I think you need to sit down." The coffee cup fell. Claire watched in slow motion as it tumbled off the table and exploded on the floor, brown liquid spreading across the scuffed linoleum like blood. But the man didn't even notice. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but desperate, and pulled her hand closer, staring at the ring like it held the secrets of the universe. "This ring belonged to my fiancé." His voice cracked. "I gave this to her 24 years ago. She died wearing it. They found it by the river after the accident. But her body, They never found her body. Tears were streaming down his face now, and he didn't seem to care that everyone in the cafe was staring. Where did you get this, please? You have to tell me where you got this. Claire felt like the floor was falling away beneath her feet. My mother gave it to me on my 18th birthday. She said it was from the man she loved, but he was... What's your mother's name? He was shaking her now, gentle but urgent. Please, what's her name? Isabella Dawson. The sound he made wasn't quite human, something between a sob and a gasp, like someone had punched all the air out of his lungs. Isabella. He said the name like a prayer. Isabella Hayes, oh my God, is she alive? Please tell me she's alive. Claire's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake, some cosmic joke. Yes, she's alive, but she's very sick. She's been sick for years. How old is she? 47. That's her. That's the right age. Jesus Christ, that's her. He was crying openly now. This wealthy, powerful-looking man falling apart in the middle of a dingy cafe while coffee dripped onto his expensive shoes. Where is she? I need to see her. Please. I'll pay you anything. I'll do anything. Just please take me to her. I don't understand. My name is Robert Hale, 24 years ago. I was in love with a woman named Isabella Hayes. We were going to get married. I gave her that ring, he pointed at Claire's hand, as a promise. And then one night she was driving home, and her car went off the road, into the river. They searched for weeks but never found her. They said she must have drowned, that the current carried her body away. They found that ring on the riverbank 3 days later. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, not caring that people were pulling out phones, probably recording this whole scene. I've spent 24 years believing she was dead. 24 years. And you're telling me she's alive. That she's been alive this whole time. Claire felt like she was going to throw up. She told me the man she loved was dead. She said he died before I was born. Robert's eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, locked onto hers, really looked at her for the first time. She watched as the realization hit him. How old are you? 23. Oh my God. His legs seemed to give out. He sat down hard on the edge of the booth. Oh my God, are you? Claire's hand went to her stomach instinctively, protectively, even though it made no sense. My mom said my father died. She never told me anything about him except that he loved her, that they were going to get married. I never knew. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. She was pregnant, and I never knew. The cafe had gone completely silent. Even the cook had come out from the back to watch. Rosie stood by the register with her hand over her mouth. I need to see her, Robert said, standing up again. His whole body was trembling. Right now. Please. I've lost 24 years. I can't lose another minute. Is she here in the city? Please tell me she's close. Claire's mind was racing. This was insane. This man was clearly insane. But the ring, the dates matched, the age matched, and the way he'd looked at that ring, like his whole soul was breaking open. She's in the Mission District, but she's very sick. I don't care. He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands and threw what looked like several $100 bills on the counter. That's for the coffee and anything I broke, please. Please take me to her. Claire looked at Rosie, who nodded slowly, tears in her own eyes. Go, honey. I'll cover your shift. I don't even know you. My name is Robert Hale. I own Hale Technologies. You can look me up. I'm not crazy, and I'm not dangerous. I'm just a man who lost the love of his life and just found out she might be alive. He held out his hands, palms up, pleading. Please, if there's even a chance. Please. Claire looked down at the ring on her finger, the ring that had been her only connection to a father she'd never known. A love story she'd thought was just a fairy tale. Maybe it wasn't. My bus doesn't come for another 20 minutes, she heard herself say. I have a car outside. Robert was already moving toward the door. Please, I'll drive you. I'll do whatever you want, just... Please. Claire untied her apron with numb fingers and grabbed her purse. This was probably the stupidest thing she'd ever done, getting into a car with a stranger. But something in her gut, something that had never steered her wrong, told her this was real. If you're lying, she started. I'm not. I swear on everything I have. I'm not. They walked out into the bright San Francisco morning, and Claire felt like she was stepping into a different world, a world where impossible things happened, where fairy tales might actually come true. Robert's car was exactly what she expected. Sleek, black, probably cost more than her entire apartment building. He opened the passenger door for her with shaking hands. "What's the address?" She gave it to him, and he punched it into the GPS. 15 minutes. They were 15 minutes away from either the biggest mistake of Claire's life or the answer to every prayer she'd never thought to say. As Robert pulled into traffic, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, Claire twisted the ring on her finger and prayed. Really prayed. For the first time in years, please let this be real. Please let my mom be okay. Please let this not be the universe playing the cruelest joke imaginable. The city passed by in a blur, and neither of them said a word. There was too much to say, and no words big enough to hold it. They were going to see if a ghost was real. The 15-minute drive felt like 15 hours. Robert's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone bone white. And Claire couldn't stop twisting the ring around her finger. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? When they finally pulled up to the rundown apartment building in the Mission District, Robert stared at it like he was seeing a war zone. Paint peeling off in strips, broken windows patched with cardboard, a rusty fire escape that looked one strong wind away from collapsing. "She's been living here," his voice cracked. "All this time." Claire felt a flash of defensive anger. "It's what we could afford. I didn't mean..." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. If I'd known..." Claire got out before he could finish. She didn't want his pity, didn't want to hear about all the years of luxury he'd had while her mother withered away in a fourth-floor walk-up with no elevator. She led him up the stairs, her keys already in her hand. Each step creaked under their weight. The hallway smelled like cooking grease and mildew. Robert said nothing, but she could feel him taking it all in. The water stains on the ceiling, the flickering fluorescent light, the sound of a couple fighting through thin walls. Claire stopped at apartment 4C. Her hand shook as she unlocked the door. "Wait." Robert grabbed her arm, gentle but firm. His face had gone pale again. What if it's not her? What if this is all some horrible mistake? "Then we'll know," Claire said quietly. But her own heart was hammering. What if her mother didn't recognize him? What if the dementia had gotten so bad that this whole thing was pointless? She pushed the door open. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Small, cramped, everything worn and secondhand but clean. The kind of clean that came from having nothing but still trying to maintain dignity. Sunlight struggled through the dusty window, casting pale shadows across the threadbare carpet. "Mom," Claire called softly. "It's me, I brought someone." From the bedroom came a weak cough, then silence. Robert stood frozen in the doorway like his feet had grown roots. Claire could see him trembling. "Come on," she whispered, leading him toward the bedroom. The door was already half open. Claire pushed it the rest of the way and stepped inside. Robert right behind her. Isabella Dawson lay in bed, propped up on pillows that had seen better years. She looked so small under the faded quilt, so fragile. Her hair, once dark and lustrous according to old photos, had gone mostly gray. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones too prominent, skin too pale. The illness had aged her beyond her 47 years. But her eyes, those eyes were still the same shade of warm brown Claire remembered from her childhood. Robert made a sound like he'd been shot. Isabella's head turned slowly toward the door. She blinked, trying to focus. Then her gaze landed on the man standing there in his expensive suit, looking completely out of place in her shabby bedroom. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Isabella's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "No, you're not real. You're not real. I'm dreaming again. Bella." Robert's voice broke on the name, just completely shattered. "Oh my God. Bella, it's really you." He crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to his knees beside the bed, his expensive suit crumpling on the worn carpet. His hands reached for hers, shaking so badly he could barely hold them. "You're alive. You're alive." "How are you alive?" Isabella was crying now, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Robert, is it really... Oh God, Robert, I thought you were dead. They told me you were dead. Who told you I was dead, baby? I've been alive this whole time. I never left San Francisco. I've been right here. No. Isabella shook her head frantically, pulling her hands back. No, you can't be here. You can't see me like this. I'm not that girl anymore. Look at me, Robert. Just look at me. I am looking at you. He recaptured her hands, bringing them to his lips. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Don't lie to me. I have never lied to you. His voice was fierce now, desperate. Not once, not ever, Bella. They told me you died. Your car went off the road, into the river. They searched for weeks and never found you. I thought, Jesus Christ. I thought I lost you forever. Isabella's face crumpled. The accident, I remember. I remember the car. The brakes didn't work. I couldn't stop. And then the water, and the fire. And I thought I was dying. But you didn't die. Robert was touching her face now, her hair, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. You survived. How did you survive? Fisherman. Isabella's voice was distant, lost in memory. In Maine. They found me downstream, barely alive. I was in a coma for weeks. When I woke up, I didn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I came from. Nothing. Robert's face went through about 6 different emotions at once. Amnesia. For years, fragments came back slowly. By the time I started to remember you, to remember us, it had been so long, and I was sick by then, and poor, and I had Claire, and I thought, how could I go back? How could I show up after all that time with nothing? You were probably married. Moved on. Robert's laugh was bitter. Bella, I never moved on. Not for a single day. I built an entire company, made more money than God, and every bit of it was meaningless because you weren't there. I never married, never even dated. How could I? You were it for me. You were everything. Claire stood in the doorway, watching her parents, reconnect after 24 years, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. This was real. This was actually happening. Claire? Isabella suddenly seemed to remember her daughter was there. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have tried to find him. Mom, it's okay. No, it's not. Isabella reached out a shaking hand toward her. You grew up without a father because I was too scared, too ashamed. Robert's head snapped toward Claire like he'd been electrocuted. Really looked at her for the first time since they'd entered the apartment. His eyes moved from her face to Isabella's and back again, seeing the resemblance that had been there all along. She's mine, he whispered. Not a question, a realization. Oh my God, she's mine. Claire felt her eyes burn. I think so, yeah. Robert stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off her. You're my daughter. Apparently, I have a daughter. He was crying again. I have a daughter and I never knew. 23 years. I missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school. It's not your fault, Claire said quickly. You didn't know, but I should have known. I should have looked harder, should have demanded they keep searching. He turned back to Isabella. Were you pregnant when the accident happened? Isabella nodded, sobbing. 3 months. I was going to tell you that night. I had a whole plan, with dinner and candles, and I was so happy, Robert. So damn happy. And then the brakes failed and everything just ended. But it didn't end. Robert moved back to the bed, reaching for both women now. You're both here. You're both alive. Do you understand what that means? I lost everything 24 years ago, and I just got it all back. In one morning. Both of you. Claire felt herself being pulled into an embrace she'd never experienced before. Her mother on one side, weak but warm, and her father on the other, strong and solid and completely falling apart. They stood like that for what felt like forever. 3 people who should have been a family 2 decades ago, finally finding each other, when they finally pulled apart. Robert's face had transformed. The hollowness was gone, replaced by something Claire couldn't quite name. Purpose, maybe, or hope. We're going to fix this, he said firmly. All of it, Bella. I'm calling the best doctors in the state, today, right now. Whatever you need, whatever it costs. Robert, I can't afford. You're not paying for a damn thing. You're the mother of my child. You're the woman I've loved for 24 years. You think I'm going to let money be an issue?" His voice softened. "Please, let me take care of you. Let me make up for all the years I couldn't." Isabella looked at Claire, uncertainty in her eyes. Claire squeezed her mother's hand. "Let him help, Mom." "Okay," Isabella whispered. "Okay." Robert pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling my personal physician. He'll know who to refer us to, and we're getting you out of this apartment. This is our home. This is a death trap with mold and no elevator." Robert's voice was gentle but firm. "You're coming to stay with me. Both of you. I have 12 bedrooms sitting empty in a house I've been rattling around in alone for 2 decades. Please, please come home with me." Claire and Isabella exchanged looks. It was too much, too fast. But looking at Robert's face, the desperation, the love, the sheer relief of having them back, how could they say no? "Okay," Isabella said again. "We'll come." Robert closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked like he might collapse from pure emotion. Instead, he kissed Isabella's forehead, then Claire's, and started making phone calls. Claire sank into the old chair by the window and watched her father take charge, reorganizing their entire lives with a few phone calls and the kind of money she'd only ever dreamed about. Her mother was crying quietly, happy tears this time, touching her face like she couldn't believe any of this was real. The silver ring on Claire's finger caught the light one more time, and she finally understood. It hadn't just been a reminder of love lost. It had been a beacon, a promise, a key to bringing their family back together. Fairy tales could come true after all. Sometimes they just took 24 years and a random Tuesday morning to happen. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of doctors, tests, and decisions that would have taken Claire months to make, but Robert handled in minutes. Isabella was admitted to St. Francis Memorial, the kind of hospital Claire had only seen in movies, with marble floors and private rooms that looked more like hotel suites than medical facilities. Claire spent the first night in a chair beside her mother's bed, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a dream, that she'd be back in the shabby apartment with unpaid bills and no hope. But morning came, and she was still there. Robert appeared at 7 with coffee and bagels, looking like he hadn't slept either. "The neurologist will be here at 9, he said, handing her a cup. "And the cardiologist at 10. Dr. Morrison thinks we should run a full panel. Blood work, MRI, the works. How much is this going to cost?" The words slipped out before Claire could stop them. Robert's expression softened. Don't even think about that, please. I can't help it. I've been thinking about costs my entire life. Well, you don't have to anymore." He sat down in the other chair, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Claire, I know this is overwhelming. I know we're basically strangers, but you're my daughter. Let me do this." The word daughter still felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit yet. "It's just weird," she admitted. 3 days ago, I was pouring coffee and wondering how I'd make rent. Now I'm sitting in a hospital room that probably costs more per night than my apartment costs per month. Is your landlord decent? Do you have a lease? Claire laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Decent, Mr. Kowalski threatened to evict us last month because we were 5 days late with rent. Robert's jaw tightened. Give me his number. I'll handle it. You don't have to. Claire. He turned to face her fully. I missed 23 years of your life. First steps, first words, birthdays, Christmases. Every single milestone that matters. I can't get that time back. But I can make damn sure you never have to worry about rent or food or taking care of your mother alone ever again. So please let me. Something in Claire's chest cracked open. She'd been holding it together so well. But the kindness in his voice, the genuine regret in his eyes, it was too much. She started crying, not the quiet, controlled tears she'd learned to cry silently in the bathroom so her mother wouldn't hear. Real, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Robert pulled her into his arms without hesitation, and Claire let herself break down against his expensive shirt. Let herself be held by her father for the first time in her life. I've got you, he murmured. I've got both of you now, I promise. Over the next week, the test results came in piece by piece. Isabella's condition was serious but treatable, a combination of autoimmune disease and chronic infections that had gone untreated for too long. with proper medication and care. Dr. Morrison was cautiously optimistic. She should have been diagnosed years ago, he told Robert and Claire in his office. But without insurance, without regular checkups, these things slip through the cracks. Will she recover? Claire asked, afraid of the answer. With time and treatment? Yes. She'll need physical therapy, proper nutrition, probably 6 months of intensive care. But there's no reason she can't live a normal, healthy life. Claire had to sit down. 6 months ago, she'd been preparing herself for her mother's death. Now someone was telling her Isabella could actually get better. Robert squeezed her shoulder. Whatever she needs, whatever it takes. As Isabella slowly began to improve, color returning to her cheeks, strength coming back to her limbs, she and Robert started to rebuild what they'd lost. Claire watched them from the doorway sometimes, not wanting to intrude. She'd catch them holding hands in silence, or Robert reading to Isabella from books she used to love. Once, she walked in to find them both crying, Robert's head on Isabella's lap while she stroked his hair. "I'm sorry," Isabella was whispering. "I'm so sorry I didn't find you." No, don't apologize, you survived. That's all that matters." But they also talked about the good times, the memories they'd made before everything fell apart. One afternoon, Claire sat with them while they reminisced, finally hearing the full story of how her parents fell in love. "I was 21, Robert said, a smile playing at his lips. "Just graduated from Stanford, thought I was hot shit. And then I saw this girl at a bookstore in North Beach. She was reading in the poetry section, completely absorbed, and she had this look on her face, like the words were breaking her heart in the best way. I was reading Neruda," Isabella added, her voice stronger now after days of rest and medication. "And this cocky kid in a Stanford sweatshirt tried to impress me by quoting it, badly. I was nervous. You said I love you without knowing how, when the line is, I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where, but you still gave me your number, because you looked so mortified when I corrected you," Isabella laughed, and it was the first real laugh Claire had heard from her in years. "And because you had kind eyes. We went to dinner that night," Robert continued, "and then we were together every day for the next 8 months. I'd never felt anything like it. She was everything. Smart, funny, passionate about literature and art and making the world better. You were going to change the world with your technology," Isabella said softly, touching his face. "And you did." "No, I just made money. The world I wanted to change was the one where we'd grow old together." Claire watched them, feeling like she was witnessing something sacred. This was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version from movies, but something deeper, something that survived death and time and impossible circumstances. "Tell me about the ring," she said. "When did you give it to her?" Robert's eyes lit up. 6 months in, we'd taken a weekend trip to Big Sur, drove down the coast, stayed in this tiny cabin overlooking the ocean. On the last night, we were sitting on the beach watching the sunset, and I just knew. I knew I wanted to spend my life with her. He didn't have a fancy ring," Isabella added. "He'd spent all his money on the trip. So we drove to this little antique shop in Carmel, and I picked out this silver band because it was simple and perfect. I promised her that one day, when I'd made my fortune, I'd buy her something with diamonds, something worthy of her. But I never wanted anything else." Isabella held up her hand, where the ring now sat again after 24 years. This was always enough. Claire twisted her own ring, the one she'd worn all these years without knowing its true story. "Why did you give it to me, Mom, instead of keeping it?" Isabella's eyes filled. "Because I wanted you to know you came from love, real love. Even though you'd never met your father, I wanted you to have proof that he existed, that what we had was real." She reached for Claire's hand. "I never imagined it would lead you back to him. It's like the ring knew," Claire said quietly. "Like it was waiting for the right moment." "Maybe it was," Robert said. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. "You know what the worst part was? After the accident, they found the ring on the riverbank 3 days later, just sitting there in the mud. And I knew that meant she was gone, because she never would have taken it off." "I didn't," Isabella said. "It came off in the water. I remember reaching for it, trying to hold on, but the current was too strong. I kept it. For 24 years, I kept it in a box on my dresser. Couldn't bring myself to wear it or get rid of it. It was all I had left of you. And then our daughter wore it into a cafe, Isabella said, wonder in her voice. What are the odds? There are no odds, Robert said firmly. It was meant to happen. All of it. The pain, the lost years, the impossible survival. It all led to this moment, to getting you both back. Claire felt tears threatening again. She'd spent her whole life feeling like she was missing something, some essential piece that would make her whole. Now she understood. It wasn't just a father she'd been missing. It was this, the story of where she came from, the proof that she was born from something beautiful and true. So what happens now? She asked. Robert turned from the window. Now we move forward. Your mother gets stronger. You start college. You said you wanted to study medicine. I did, but that's expensive. Was, past tense. You're starting in the fall, whatever school you want. Robert, Isabella, don't argue with me on this. Our daughter is brilliant. She's been taking care of you, working herself to death, sacrificing her dreams, no more. She gets to have dreams now. Claire couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. And when your mother's well enough, Robert continued, you're both moving into the house. No arguments. I have space. You need space. It's settled. Your house, Isabella said slowly. Is it? The one in Pacific Heights? You remember it. I remember you showing me the plans. You were so excited about building your dream home. It's not a dream home when you're living in it alone. Robert came back to sit beside her. But it could be, with you both there. It could finally be what I always wanted it to be. A home, Isabella whispered. A home. Claire looked at her parents, really looked at them, and saw the future spreading out like a map. A future where her mother was healthy, where she could go to school, where she had a father who wanted to be part of her life. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for, and all because of a silver ring and a Tuesday morning at a cafe. 6 weeks later, Claire stood in the doorway of what was now her bedroom and tried to process the fact that it was bigger than her entire old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay, a king-sized bed with sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent, a walk-in closet that echoed when she stepped inside, her own bathroom with heated floors and a tub big enough to swim in. It was obscene. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. You okay? Robert appeared behind her, carrying the last box from the moving truck. Not that there were many boxes. Most of what Claire and Isabella owned wasn't worth moving. Robert had quietly arranged for everything they needed to just appear. New clothes, new furniture, a laptop for Claire's college applications that made her old phone look like a relic from the Stone Age. Yeah, Claire said, not entirely convincing herself. Just adjusting. I know it's a lot. Robert set the box down gently. If you want to change anything, paint color, furniture, whatever, just say the word. This is your home now, your space. Your home. The word still didn't feel real. Where's Mom? Physical therapy session. Marcus drove her. Marcus was apparently Robert's driver. Because of course he had a driver. She should be back in an hour. Claire nodded, twisting the ring on her finger. A habit she couldn't break, Robert noticed. You know, he said carefully, I had that ring cleaned and resized before I gave it back to your mother. If you want, I can have a jeweler make you a replica so you can keep wearing it. The offer touched something deep in Claire's chest. I'd like that. Thank you. Robert smiled. That soft smile he seemed to reserve just for her and Isabella. I'll make the call. Now come on, let me show you the rest of the house. Properly, this time. The tour was overwhelming. 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library that looked like something out of a movie, a gym, a home theater, a wine cellar, and a kitchen that could serve a restaurant. Everything was elegant, expensive, and somehow still felt empty, despite all the space. How long have you lived here? Claire asked as they walked through the library. Built it 15 years ago, after the company really took off. Robert ran his hand along a bookshelf. I thought having a big house would make me feel less alone. Turns out it just gave me more space to rattle around in. Claire noticed how few personal touches there were. No photos on the walls, No knickknacks or clutter. Just beautiful, sterile perfection. "It feels like a museum," she said, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right." Robert looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. "I never really made it a home, just a place to sleep between work. But now," he turned to her, "now maybe it can be different, with you and your mom here." A door opened somewhere below, and voices echoed up the stairs. Isabella was back. They found her in the main foyer with Marcus and a woman Claire had never seen before. 50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a crisp uniform that screamed, "Staff." "Mr. Hale," the woman said with a tight smile. "Mrs. Dawson's therapy went well. She's tired but improved from last week." "Thank you, Martha." Robert helped Isabella to the nearby couch. "Martha, this is my daughter. Claire, Martha Lowell. She's been managing the house for, how long now?" 24 years, sir." Martha's eyes swept over Claire with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. Not hostile exactly, but not warm either. "Welcome to the household, Miss Dawson." "Thanks." Claire felt uncomfortable under that sharp gaze. "Martha's been indispensable," Robert continued. "Keeps everything running smoothly. I don't know what I'd do without her. Just doing my job, sir." Martha's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Will there be anything else?" "Not right now, thank you." Martha nodded and disappeared down a hallway with footsteps that were somehow both swift and silent. "She seems—" Claire searched for a diplomatic word. "Efficient," Isabella finished, settling into the couch with a sigh. "Very efficient." Something in her mother's tone made Claire look twice. Isabella was staring at the hallway where Martha had vanished with an odd expression. "You okay, Mom?" "Fine, sweetheart, just tired." But her fingers were tight on the armrest. Over the next few weeks, Claire tried to settle into her new life. She enrolled in community college for the fall semester, pre-med track, with Robert insisting he'd transfer her to Stanford or Berkeley after she finished her general requirements. She learned to navigate the house without getting lost. She had awkward conversations with Robert over breakfast about music and movies and all the small things fathers and daughters were supposed to know about each other. Isabella grew stronger every day. Color returned to her face. She started taking walks in the garden Robert had never bothered to maintain, or bothered to. She laughed more, smiled more, started looking like the woman in the old photographs again. But Claire noticed other things too, like how Martha always seemed to be watching. Not obviously. She was too professional for that. But Claire would catch her staring at Isabella with an expression that made her skin crawl, something cold and assessing. And the way Martha spoke to Robert was just slightly too familiar, too intimate, like she was more than just an employee. One afternoon, Claire found her mother standing in the library, staring at a photo album she'd pulled from a high shelf. "Mom!" Isabella jumped, nearly dropping the album. "Oh, sweetheart, you startled me." "Sorry, what's that?" "Just old photos of Robert from before." Isabella's voice was strange, tight. "Claire, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Has Martha said anything to you? About me? Or about Robert? Or anything?" "No." "Why?" Isabella closed the album carefully. "It's probably nothing. The way she looks at me sometimes, at us, like she resents us being here. Maybe she's just protective of Robert, you know? After all these years. Maybe?" But Isabella didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe I'm being paranoid. The doctor said the medication can make me anxious. Do you want me to say something to Dad?" "No." The word came out too sharp. Isabella softened. "No, don't worry him. He's been so happy having us here. I don't want to cause problems over a feeling." But Claire couldn't shake the unease. She started paying more attention to Martha's movements through the house, the way she'd appear in doorways just as Claire was passing, the way she'd linger when serving meals, listening to conversations. One evening, Claire came downstairs for water and heard voices from Robert's study. The door was slightly ajar. "Can't expect me to just accept this." Martha's voice, lower than usual but sharp with emotion. "Martha, we've been over this." Robert sounded exhausted. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, but my personal life, I've been here for 24 years. I've seen you at your worst, held you when you cried over her, and now she just waltzes back in like nothing happened." "That's enough." Robert's voice went cold. Isabella is the mother of my child. She's the woman I love, has always loved. I'm sorry if that's difficult for you, but it's how it is. Silence. Then Martha's voice, so quiet Claire almost missed it. You never even saw me. Martha, all these years. Right here, and you never saw me. Claire backed away before she could hear more, her heart pounding. She went back upstairs and sat on her bed in the dark, processing what she'd overheard. Martha was in love with Robert, had been for years, probably, and now Isabella was back, taking the place Martha had hoped to fill. It was sad, in a way, but it was also creepy, the way Martha watched them, the resentment simmering under that professional facade. Claire should tell someone, her mom, her dad, but what would she say? Your housekeeper is in love with you and hates us for existing. That sounded paranoid, dramatic, and her mother was finally happy. Robert was finally happy. Did she really want to disrupt that over a feeling? She decided to wait, to watch, to make sure Martha stayed professional and kept her distance. It would be fine. Martha was just bitter and lonely. She'd adjust. Eventually, Claire lay back on her expensive bed in her enormous room and stared at the ceiling. This new life was everything she'd ever wanted. Security, family, a future full of possibilities. So why did she feel like something was wrong? Why did the house suddenly feel too big, too quiet? Why did every shadow seem to hide something watching, waiting? She shook her head at her own paranoia. Too many late nights. Too much change too fast. That's all it was. Everything was fine. Everything was going to be fine. But that night, Claire locked her bedroom door for the first time since moving in. Just in case, Robert's private investigator showed up on a Tuesday morning. 3 months after Isabella and Claire had moved in. Claire was in the kitchen making coffee when she heard the doorbell, followed by Robert's voice in the foyer. Tense in a way she'd never heard before, she found him in his study with a man in a rumpled suit. Manila folders spread across the desk like evidence at a crime scene. Dad, Claire hesitated in the doorway. Everything okay? Robert looked up, and the expression on his face made her stomach drop. Anger, horror, something that looked like grief. Claire, sweetheart, can you get your mother? She needs to hear this too. 10 minutes later, they were all seated. Robert behind his desk, Isabella on the leather couch looking worried, Claire beside her, and the investigator standing like he was about to deliver the worst news imaginable. His name was Marcus Chen, not the driver. Different Marcus. He'd been working on Robert's case for 2 months, ever since Robert had quietly asked him to look into the accident from 24 years ago. I'll be direct, Chen said, flipping open the first folder. The accident that nearly killed Mrs. Dawson wasn't an accident. The brake lines were deliberately cut. Isabella gasped. Claire felt the room tilt. That's impossible, Isabella whispered. They said it was mechanical failure, because no one was looking for foul play. Why would they? But when I started digging, Chen pulled out photographs. I found the mechanic who examined the wreckage back then. He's retired now, living in Sacramento. When I showed him these photos and asked him to look again with fresh eyes, he said the cuts were clean, too clean, made with tools, not worn through naturally. Robert's hands were clenched into fists. Who? I'm getting there. Chen pulled out more documents. I started looking at everyone in Mrs. Dawson's life back then. Family, friends, co-workers. Then I looked at you, Mr. Hale, your business associates, your staff. Martha, Robert said flatly. It was Martha, wasn't it? Claire's blood went cold. Chen nodded. 3 days before the accident, Martha Lowell purchased brake fluid and specific tools from an automotive shop in Oakland. She paid cash, but the owner remembered her because she asked detailed questions about how brake systems work. Oh my God, Isabella breathed. There's more. Chen pulled out what looked like old employment records. I did a deep background check. Before working for you, Mr. Hale, Martha was employed by 2 other wealthy men. Both times. She left under suspicious circumstances after becoming overly attached to her employers. One filed a restraining order. The other just paid her to leave quietly. Robert stood abruptly, pacing to the window. 24 years. She's been in my house for 24 years. I also found this. Chen placed a worn leather journal on the desk. Hidden in her room during a warranted search last week, it's disturbing. Claire reached for it before Robert could stop her. She opened to a random page and immediately wished she hadn't. March 15th. He cried again today. 20 years and he still cries for her. Why can't he see that I'm here? That I've always been here? If she were really gone, truly gone, with no body to mourn, maybe he could move on. Maybe he could see me. Claire flipped forward, her hands shaking. June 3rd. The body was never found. What if she survived? What if she's out there somewhere? The thought keeps me awake at night. Not guilt. I don't feel guilty for what I did. She wasn't worthy of him. But fear. Fear that she'll come back. Jesus Christ. Robert muttered, reading over Claire's shoulder. Isabella looked like she might be sick. She tried to kill me. She tried to kill me because she wanted you. There are dozens of entries, Chen said quietly. Going back years. The obsession started almost immediately after she began working here. By the time of the accident, she was completely fixated. Robert's voice was ice. Where is she now? That's the concerning part. She noticed our investigation, started acting erratic, selling items from the house. Small things she thought wouldn't be missed. Last week, she purchased a one-way ticket to Madrid. Leaves tonight? Madrid, Isabella frowned. Why Madrid? No extradition treaty for this type of crime. She researched it extensively online. Our tech team found her search history. Robert was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling the police right now. Already done, Chen said. They're coordinating with airport security. She'll be arrested when she tries to board. Claire couldn't stop staring at the journal. Page after page of obsession, delusion, and cold justification for attempted murder. She doesn't love him like I do. She doesn't understand him. I'm the one who's been here through everything. I'm the one who deserves him. How did we not see this? Isabella asked, her voice cracking. How did she hide it so well? People like Martha are experts at masking, Chen explained. She maintained perfect professionalism on the surface, while nurturing the obsession underneath. It's not uncommon in cases of erotomania, delusional belief that someone loves them or should love them. Robert sank back into his chair. Looking 10 years older, I trusted her, let her into my home, my life, and the whole time she was. You couldn't have known, Claire said, touching his arm. She was good at lying, but your mother paid the price. Robert looked at Isabella with anguish. 24 years, our daughter growing up without a father, you suffering, alone, nearly dying, all because of someone I employed, someone I trusted. Robert, no. Isabella moved to him, taking his hands. This isn't your fault. You're not responsible for her sickness. I should have protected you. You didn't know. None of us did. Chen cleared his throat. There's one more thing. A witness came forward. Another former employee who worked here briefly 15 years ago. She said Martha bragged about taking care of a problem back in the day. The woman didn't think much of it at the time. Thought Martha was just being dramatic. But when she saw the news about Mrs. Dawson being alive, she put it together. Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up. Police have her. She's in custody. The relief in the room was palpable, but it was mixed with something else. Anger, betrayal, the sickening realization of how close Martha had been all these years. What happens now? Claire asked. She'll be formally charged, Chen said. Attempted murder, conspiracy, probably a dozen other charges. With this evidence, he gestured to the journals, receipts, witness testimony. It's airtight. She'll go away for a long time. Good, Robert said coldly. Because if I ever see her again outside of a courtroom, I can't be held responsible for what I'll do. Isabella squeezed his hand. We're safe now. That's what matters. But Claire wasn't so sure. Martha might be in custody, but the damage she'd caused couldn't be undone. 24 years of stolen time. A family torn apart. Her mother nearly killed. I want to be there, Claire said suddenly. At the trial, I want to look her in the face and let her know she failed, that we're together now, and nothing she did mattered. Robert studied her. It won't be easy, hearing the details. I don't care. She tried to kill my mother. She stole you from us. She deserves to see exactly what she didn't destroy. Isabella nodded slowly. Claire's right. We should all be there. Show her that her obsession accomplished nothing but ruining her own life. Chen gathered his files. The day will be in touch about testimony. In the meantime, I'd suggest changing all the locks, security codes, maybe get a few cameras installed, just to be safe. Already planned, Robert said. Marcus, the driver Marcus, is handling it today. After Chen left, the three of them sat in silence. The journal still lay open on the desk, Martha's cramped handwriting visible, years of delusion documented in ink. I'm sorry, Robert finally said. I'm so sorry I brought this into our lives. You didn't, Isabella said firmly. She did. Her choices. Her sickness. Her crime. Not yours. Mom's right, Claire added. You're the victim here too. She manipulated you, violated your trust. But you suffered more. Robert looked at Isabella. You lost everything because of her. No. Isabella's voice was strong. I lost everything because of her. But I also survived, against impossible odds. And now we're here, together. She tried to destroy us and failed. That's what matters. Robert pulled them both close, and they held each other while the truth settled around them like dust after an explosion. Martha Lowell had tried to erase Isabella from existence, had sabotaged a car, caused an accident, and spent 24 years watching Robert grieve. But she'd failed. Love had survived. Family had survived. And Martha would spend the rest of her life knowing that her obsession had accomplished nothing but her own destruction. Claire felt the silver ring on her finger, the one that had brought them all together, the one that had exposed the truth. Sometimes the evidence of love was stronger than hatred could ever be, and sometimes justice actually won. The news broke the next morning. By noon, it was everywhere. Cable news, social media, newspapers, tech billionaire's housekeeper arrested for attempted murder. 24-year obsession ends in handcuffs. The woman who tried to kill for love. Claire watched the coverage from the living room while Isabella slept upstairs. Sedated by the doctor, Robert had called when she'd collapsed in his arms the night before. The shock had been too much. Her body, still recovering, couldn't handle the emotional weight. Turn it off, Robert said quietly from the doorway. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Dark circles under his eyes, suit rumpled, hair uncombed. Please. Claire clicked the remote. The screen went black, but the silence was somehow worse. How is she? Sleeping, finally. Robert sank onto the couch beside her. The doctor said it's not physical. Her body's actually doing well. It's the psychological trauma. Finding out someone tried to murder you is one thing. Finding out they lived in your house, served you meals, watched you for months. He pressed his palms against his eyes. Christ, it's not your fault. Everyone keeps saying that. But she was my employee, my responsibility. I should have seen. Dad. Claire grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. Martha fooled everyone. Professional therapists, background checks, 24 years of co-workers. You're not a mind reader. You're just a guy who trusted someone you shouldn't have. That doesn't make you guilty. Robert's eyes filled. I keep thinking about all the times she was in this house, near your mother. What if she'd tried something else? What if... But she didn't. Mom's alive. We're all alive. And Martha's in jail where she belongs. Is she, though? Robert pulled out his phone and showed Claire a news alert. Her lawyer's already claiming mental incompetence, erotomania, delusional disorder. They're going to argue she wasn't in control of her actions. Claire felt fury rise in her chest. That's bullshit. Those journals were calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. I know, but that doesn't mean a jury will see it that way. Robert stood and paced. The DA called this morning. They want us to testify. All three of us. They think our testimony, the human cost, will make it harder for the defense to paint Martha as a victim of mental illness. Good. When preliminary hearing is in 2 weeks, the trial could take months. He stopped at the window, staring out at the garden. I don't know if your mother can handle that. This has already broken something in her. As if on cue, footsteps sounded on the stairs. They both turned to see Isabella, pale and unsteady, gripping the banister. Mom, you should be resting. I heard the TV. Isabella's voice was hoarse. It's everywhere, isn't it? Robert was beside her in seconds, supporting her weight. Come sit down. Please. She let him guide her to the couch but didn't relax into it. Her whole body was rigid, hands trembling in her lap. They're saying she's crazy, that she couldn't help it. Isabella looked at Claire with hollow eyes. But that's not true. I saw her eyes that day in the hospital. When I first woke up here and she looked at me, there was calculation there. Hatred, yes, but controlled. Intentional. We know, Claire said gently. The day knows too. They have the journals, the evidence. But what if it's not enough? Isabella's voice cracked. What if she gets some reduced sentence because of mental illness? What if she's out in 10 years instead of... She won't be. Robert's voice was steel. I've hired the best prosecution team money can buy. They're working with the DA. Martha Lowell will pay for what she did. I promise you. You can't promise that. Isabella stood abruptly, swaying. You can't control juries or judges or... She pressed a hand to her mouth, breathing hard. I need air. I need to... She made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. Robert caught her before she hit the floor. And Claire was already on her phone calling Dr. Morrison. This wasn't just psychological anymore. This was her mother's body shutting down under stress. It couldn't process. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Robert had probably paid for priority response. Isabella was conscious, but barely. Her blood pressure dangerously low. Claire rode with her while Robert followed in his car, and the whole way Isabella kept whispering the same thing. She's still winning. Even from jail, she's still winning. At the hospital, Dr. Morrison ran tests while Claire and Robert waited in a private room that probably cost more per hour than most people's mortgages. This is my fault, Robert said for the 100th time. The stress... Stop, Claire turned to him. Just stop. You keep taking responsibility for everyone else's actions. But you know what? Martha did this. Not you. She cut the brake lines. She caused the accident. She hid for 24 years. And now she's causing Mom to collapse because her existence, even in jail, is a reminder of trauma. None of that is on you. But I enabled it. I let her stay. You trusted an employee who seemed trustworthy. That's normal human behavior, Dad. What's not normal is obsessive delusion and attempted murder. Claire grabbed his hand. You want to help? Then stop wallowing in guilt and focus on getting Mom through this. She needs you strong, not falling apart. Robert stared at her, something shifting in his expression. When did you get so wise? I had to grow up fast. Claire squeezed his hand. Someone had to hold it together while Mom was sick. I got good at it. Now it's your turn to learn. Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. She's stable, but we need to talk about her mental health. The trauma is manifesting physically. Panic attacks, dissociation. What we saw today. I'm recommending intensive therapy, possibly medication for anxiety, and she needs to be kept away from triggers. No news coverage. No discussion of the case unless absolutely necessary. The trial, Robert started, might be too much for her right now. Morrison sat down. I know you want justice. I know she deserves to face her attacker, but we have to prioritize Isabella's health. If testifying could cause a complete breakdown, we need to consider alternatives. No, Isabella's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in a hospital gown, Iv Pole beside her, looking frail but determined. I'm testifying. I don't care what it costs me. Bella, Robert, that woman stole 24 years from us. She tried to kill me. She watched you suffer and felt nothing. I will not let her hide behind mental illness and get away with it. Isabella's hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. I'll do the therapy. I'll take the medication. Whatever I need to do to get through this. But I'm facing her in court. I'm telling the world what she did, and I'm watching them lock her away for the rest of her miserable life. Doctor. Morrison looked at Robert, who looked at Claire. They all knew there was no talking Isabella out of this. Okay, Morrison said finally, but with conditions, daily therapy sessions, medication compliance, and if at any point I think the stress is life-threatening, you stop. No arguments. Deal. Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella threw herself into preparation with an intensity that scared Claire. She met with prosecutors, reviewed evidence, practiced testimony. She did therapy every morning and took her anxiety medication religiously. But underneath the compliance was something harder, something that looked like rage. Claire understood. Her mother had been gentle her whole life, kind, soft-spoken, forgiving. But Martha had broken something in her, had revealed that sometimes kindness wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to fight. The preliminary hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The courthouse was swarmed with media, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Robert's security team formed a barrier as they moved through the crowd. But Claire could still hear the questions. How does it feel knowing your housekeeper tried to kill your fiancé? Mrs. Dawson, do you think Martha Lowell deserves sympathy? Claire, what's it like meeting your father after 23 years? Inside, the courtroom was cold and sterile. Martha sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her gray hair loose around her face. She looked smaller than Claire remembered, more pathetic, until she turned and looked directly at Isabella. The hatred in that gaze was palpable, raw, unrepentant. Isabella stiffened beside Claire, and Robert grabbed her hand, but Isabella didn't look away. She stared right back, refusing to be intimidated. The judge entered, and the hearing began. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. Journals, receipts, witness testimony, the mechanic's expert analysis. Each piece damning. Martha's lawyer argued mental incompetence, presenting psychiatric evaluations claiming she suffered from erotomania and couldn't distinguish fantasy from reality. But then the prosecutor played a recording found on Martha's laptop, dated just 3 months ago. Long after the obsession had supposedly begun, Martha's voice, clear and calculated. They think I'm just staff. They don't see me plotting. Good. Let them think I'm harmless. When the time is right, when that bitch lets her guard down, I'll finish what I started. The courtroom went silent. Even Martha's lawyer looked shaken. The judge removed his glasses. Miss Lowell, that doesn't sound like someone unable to distinguish reality. Martha finally spoke, her voice cold. I knew exactly what I was doing. I just didn't care. Her lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. The judge set bail at $5 million and scheduled the trial for 3 months out. As they left, Martha's eyes followed Isabella the whole way, not with love or obsession anymore, just pure, crystallized hate. Outside, Isabella sagged against Robert. She's a monster. Yes, Robert agreed. But she's a caged monster now, and she's going to stay that way. Claire looked back at the courthouse, at the cameras and chaos, and felt the weight of what was coming. The trial would be brutal, public, invasive, but they'd face it together. As a family, 3 months felt like 3 years. Claire watched her mother transform during that time, not back into the frail woman from the shabby apartment, but into something harder, forged by fire. Isabella attended therapy religiously, took her medications, practiced her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep, but underneath the compliance was a warrior preparing for battle. The trial began on a Monday in October. The courthouse steps were a circus. News vans, protesters with signs, justice for Isabella, and disturbingly, free Martha, mental illness isn't a crime. And what felt like 1,000 cameras all pointed at them as they arrived. Robert's hand was tight on Isabella's elbow. Claire walked on her mother's other side, forming a protective barrier. Security kept the crowd back, but the shouted questions still reached them. Mrs. Dawson, can you forgive Martha Lowell? Mr. Hale, do you blame yourself? Claire, how does it feel watching your parents reunite under these circumstances? Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists, legal observers, and people who just wanted to witness the spectacle. Claire spotted Eduardo, the loyal employee who'd first noticed Martha's suspicious behavior. Sitting in the back, he gave them a small nod of support. The jury filed in, 12 faces trying to look neutral but failing. This case had been too publicized. Everyone had an opinion. Martha was led in by 2 bailiffs, still in her orange jumpsuit. She'd lost weight, Claire noticed. Her hair was grayer, her face more lined. Prison had aged her rapidly, but when Martha's eyes found Isabella, that familiar hatred blazed through the exhaustion. Isabella didn't flinch. She stared right back until Martha looked away. First, the judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Hendricks, called the court to order. The state of California versus Martha Jane Lowell, on the charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. How does the defendant plead? Martha's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit named Richard Crane, stood. Not guilty by reason of mental defect, Your Honor. The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Sarah Chen, remained stone-faced. They'd expected this. Very well, Judge Hendricks said. Prosecution, your opening statement. Sarah Chen stood, and the room went silent. She was known for being brilliant and ruthless, exactly why Robert had pushed for her to take the case personally. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Chen began, her voice clear and strong. This case is about obsession, but not the kind we see in movies. This is real obsession, the kind that destroys lives, tears apart families, and nearly murders an innocent woman. The defense will try to convince you that Martha Lowell is a victim of her own diseased mind, that she couldn't help her actions, that she deserves sympathy rather than punishment. Chen paused, letting the words sink in. But the evidence will show you something different. You'll hear recordings where Martha Lowell speaks with perfect clarity about her plans. You'll read journals where she meticulously details her actions and motivations. You'll hear from experts who examined her and found her fully competent to understand right from wrong. And you'll hear from the victims. Robert Hale, who trusted her for 24 years while she poisoned his household. Isabella Dawson, who nearly died because of Martha's calculated actions. And Claire Dawson, who grew up without a father because of one woman's selfish desire to possess something that was never hers to take. Chen turned to look directly at Martha. This defendant is not insane. She's not delusional. She's a calculating woman who decided that if she couldn't have Robert Hale, then no one could. And she's been lying about it for 24 years. Martha's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Chen sat down, and Richard Crane stood for the defense. My client, he began, his voice smooth as silk, is a deeply troubled woman. For those of you unfamiliar with erotomania, it's a rare psychiatric disorder where someone becomes convinced that another person, usually someone of higher social status, is in love with them. The person cannot help these delusions. They are as real to them as this courtroom is to us. He walked closer to the jury box. Martha Lowell dedicated her entire adult life to serving Robert Hale. She cleaned his house, managed his staff, became indispensable to his daily life, and somewhere in that process, her mind created a fantasy where his grief over Isabella Hayes was really grief over not choosing Martha, where every kind word was a secret declaration of love, where the only thing standing between them and happiness was the memory of a dead woman. Claire felt sick. He was good. Too good. When Isabella Dawson reappeared, alive, healthy, reclaiming her place, it shattered Martha's entire reality. Everything she'd believed for 24 years was revealed as false. For a mind already fragile, already delusional, this was catastrophic. The prosecution wants you to see a monster. I want you to see a sick woman who needs treatment, not vengeance. Crane sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Hendricks nodded. Prosecution, call your first witness. The state calls Eduardo Martinez. Eduardo took the stand, nervous but determined. Under Chen's careful questioning, he described working at the Hale mansion for 15 years, how Martha had always been professional but distant, how things changed after Isabella and Claire moved in. She started acting strange, Eduardo said, muttering to herself. I caught her going through Mrs. Dawson's things once when I asked what she was doing. She just stared at me with this look, like she hated me for interrupting. Did you report this behavior? Not at first. I thought maybe she was just stressed. But then I saw her selling things from the house. Small things. Silverware. Decorative items. Things Mr. Hale might not notice right away. That's when I told him something was wrong. And what did Mr. Hale do? He hired investigators. That's when they found everything else. Crane's cross-examination tried to paint Eduardo as disgruntled, jealous of Martha's position, but Eduardo held firm. Next came the mechanic, now 72 but sharp as ever. He explained in technical detail how brake lines don't just fail cleanly, how the cuts on Isabella's car from 24 years ago were precise, made with tools, how someone with mechanical knowledge could sabotage a vehicle to fail at high speed. Could this have been an accident? Chen asked. Absolutely not. Someone deliberately cut those lines knowing it would cause a fatal crash. Crane tried to suggest the evidence was too old, too degraded to be certain, but the mechanic had photographs, measurements, expert analysis. The damage was done. The prosecution methodically built their case. Witnesses who'd sold Martha the tools and brake fluid. Martha's former employers who described her inappropriate attachments. Psychiatrists who examined her and found her competent. And then they played the recordings. Martha's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculated. They think I'm harmless. Good. Let them think that, when the time comes, I'll finish what I started. Another recording. More recent. She doesn't deserve him. She abandoned him for 24 years. I was there. I earned him. And if the bitch won't disappear on her own, I'll help her along. The jury looked horrified. But the most damning evidence was the journals. Chen read passages aloud. Years of obsession documented in Martha's own handwriting. Plans to isolate Robert. Ways to make Isabella's life miserable if she ever returned. Fantasies about Robert finally seeing Martha as more than staff. And then the final entry, dated just weeks before her arrest. If I can't have him, I'll make sure she knows what she took from me, even if it costs everything. When Chen finished, the courtroom was dead silent. Claire looked at Martha, expecting to see shame or regret. Instead, Martha was staring at Isabella with that same cold hatred, unrepentant, unmoved. Judge Hendricks called for a recess. As they filed out, Claire heard whispers from the gallery. She's a monster. How could she live with herself? That poor family. But also, she's clearly mentally ill. This is sad, not criminal. She needs help, not prison. The jury was still out, literally and figuratively. In a private room, Isabella collapsed into a chair. I can't believe she's still trying to justify it after everything. She's sick, Robert said, but his voice was hollow. Crane's doing his job, making her sympathetic. Well, it's not working on me, Claire said fiercely. I don't care if she's sick. She tried to kill my mother, end of story. Sarah Chen entered, looking satisfied. That went well. Tomorrow we put you on the stand. She looked at Isabella. Ready. Isabella took a deep breath and straightened her spine. Yes, I'm ready. But Claire saw her mother's hands shaking in her lap and wondered if any of them were truly ready for what came next. Tomorrow, Isabella would face Martha directly, would tell the world what happened, would relive the worst night of her life. And Martha would be sitting there, listening to it all, probably enjoying every moment of pain she'd caused. Claire reached for her mother's hand and squeezed. They'd get through this. They had to. Justice depended on it. Isabella's testimony began on Tuesday morning. The courtroom was even more packed than the day before. Word had spread that the victim would finally speak. Claire sat in the front row beside Robert, both of them tense as Isabella was sworn in. Her mother looked small in the witness chair, but when she lifted her chin and met Sarah Chen's eyes, Claire saw steel there. Mrs. Dawson, Chen began gently. Can you tell the jury about the night of the accident? Isabella took a breath. It was October 15th, 24 years ago. I was driving home from the library where I worked. It was raining. Not hard, just steady. I was thinking about Robert, about telling him I was pregnant. Her voice caught. I was so happy. We were going to get married, start a family. Everything was perfect. What happened next? I was on Highway 1, taking the curves carefully because of the rain. And then, Isabella's hands gripped the armrests. The brakes didn't work. I pushed the pedal all the way down. Nothing. The car kept accelerating on the downhill. I tried the emergency brake. Nothing. I was heading straight for the guardrail and I couldn't stop. The courtroom was silent. Even Martha seemed to lean forward slightly. The car went through the rail. I remember the feeling of falling and then hitting the water. Everything went black for a moment. When I came to, the car was sinking and filling with water. I managed to get out, but the current was so strong, I remember reaching for my ring. She held up her left hand, but it slipped off, and then I saw flames. The car had caught fire somehow. I went under, and that's the last thing I remember before waking up weeks later in Maine. You had no memory. None. Not my name, not where I was from. Nothing. The fisherman who found me said I was barely alive. Severe head trauma. Burns. broken bones. They took care of me for months. When I finally started to recover, I had a baby inside me, but no memory of how she got there. Isabella looked at Claire, tears in her eyes. I gave birth to my daughter not knowing who her father was, not knowing who I was. And for years it stayed that way. Just fragments, images of a man's face, the feeling of being loved, but nothing concrete. When did your memory return? Slowly, over about 15 years, little pieces, a name, Robert, the ring, San Francisco. By the time I remembered enough to know who I was and who he was, I'd been gone so long. I was sick, poor. How could I go back? What if he'd moved on, married someone else? What if he didn't want me anymore? Isabella wiped her eyes. I was ashamed, so I stayed away. And I gave my daughter the ring so she'd know she came from love, even if she never met her father. Chen let the emotion settle. Mrs. Dawson, when you learned that your accident was deliberate, that someone had sabotaged your car intending to kill you, how did you feel? Devastated. Isabella looked directly at Martha for the first time, because it meant that everything I lost, my memory, my life with Robert, watching my daughter grow up poor and struggling, all of it was because someone decided I didn't deserve to live, that my existence was inconvenient to their fantasy. Martha's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Chen nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. No further questions. Richard Crane stood for cross-examination. Claire felt Robert tense beside her. Mrs. Dawson, Crane began, his tone respectful but probing. You say you lost your memory for 15 years. Isn't it possible you're misremembering details of the accident? No, I remember the brakes failing perfectly, but you were in a traumatic situation. Rain, darkness, fear. Could you have simply panicked and forgotten to brake properly? I pushed that pedal to the floor. There was nothing there. Crane paced. And during those 15 years of amnesia, you experienced significant psychological trauma. Correct. The doctors treating you in Maine documented severe PTSD dissociative episodes. Objection, Chen called. Relevance. I'm establishing that the witness's mental state may affect the reliability of her testimony. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said. Answer the question, Mrs. Dawson. Yes, I had trauma, but I know what happened to my car. Someone cut the brakes. The mechanic confirmed it. A mechanic examining evidence 24 years after the fact. Objection. Asked and answered. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Crane. Crane switched tactics. Mrs. Dawson, when you finally remembered Mr. Hale, why didn't you contact him immediately? Isabella's face flushed. I told you. I was ashamed. Ashamed. Or were you worried he'd reject you? That maybe your memory was wrong, and he hadn't actually loved you as much as you thought? That's not... Isn't it possible that your perception of your relationship with Mr. Hale is colored by years of building it up in your mind as some grand love story, that maybe it wasn't as serious as you remember? Robert half stood, but Claire grabbed his arm. Isabella's voice shook with anger. He gave me a ring, promised to marry me. I was carrying his child. That's not a fantasy. That's real. No further questions. Isabella stepped down, trembling. Robert was there immediately, supporting her back to their seats. You did great, Claire whispered, but her mother looked shattered. Next came Robert's testimony. He spoke about the 24 years he'd spent grieving, the empty life he'd built, how Martha had been there through it all. Professional, efficient, unremarkable. He described the shock of seeing the ring on Claire's finger, the joy and agony of finding Isabella alive. Did you ever give Martha Lowell any indication that you had romantic feelings for her? Chen asked. Never. Not once. She was an employee. Nothing more. Did she ever express feelings for you? Not directly. But looking back, there were moments. She'd stand too close, touch my arm when she didn't need to. Comments about how she understood me better than anyone. I thought she was just being kind, supportive. I never imagined. Robert's jaw tightened. I never imagined she'd try to murder someone. Crane's cross-examination tried to suggest Robert had been emotionally vulnerable, possibly sending mixed signals, but Robert was adamant. I mourned my fiancé for 24 years. I didn't date, didn't flirt, didn't give anyone any reason to think I was available. Martha invented a relationship that never existed. Then came Claire. Her testimony was shorter, but no less powerful. She described growing up poor, watching her mother deteriorate, the ring as her only connection to a father she thought was dead. "When you met Mr. Hale," Chen asked, "did you believe he was your father?" "Not immediately. But when I saw his reaction to the ring, when I heard his story and it matched my mother's, yes, I knew." "How did it feel to discover your father was alive?" Claire looked at Robert. "Like winning the lottery and getting hit by a truck at the same time. Happy, but also angry that we'd lost so much time. Time Martha Lowell stole from us." Crane had few questions for Claire. What could he ask? She was the innocent victim, the child who grew up without a father because of his client's actions. The final witness was the prosecution's star, a forensic psychiatrist named Dr. Feldman, who'd evaluated Martha extensively. "In your professional opinion," Chen asked, "does Martha Lowell suffer from erotomania?" "She has symptoms consistent with it, yes, but that doesn't mean she's not criminally responsible. My evaluation showed she understood right from wrong. She knew sabotaging a car could kill someone. She planned it carefully, covered her tracks, and lived with the secret for 24 years without confessing or seeking help. That's not the behavior of someone unable to control their actions." Could she have stopped herself? Absolutely. At multiple points. Buying the tools, cutting the brakes, watching Mrs. Dawson drive away. She could have stopped. She chose not to. Crane's cross-examination tried to muddy the waters, bringing in other experts with differing opinions. But Dr. Feldman held firm. Finally, Martha herself took the stand. Against Crane's advice, she insisted on testifying, under oath. Martha's story was chilling. She admitted to obsessing over Robert for years, admitted to cutting the brakes, admitted to hoping Isabella would die. "But you loved him," Crane prompted. "You thought he loved you back." "I don't know what I thought anymore," Martha interrupted, her voice flat. "I just knew she didn't deserve him, and when she came back, I knew I had to finish it." The courtroom gasped. Even Crane looked horrified. "You mean you planned to harm Mrs. Dawson again?" Chen asked on redirect. Martha looked directly at Isabella. "She took everything from me. 24 years I waited, and she just walked back in like she owned him. Like those years meant nothing." "Did you feel remorse?" "No. Do you now?" Martha's silence was answer enough. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Claire held her breath. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty." Isabella's sob of relief echoed through the courtroom. "On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On obstruction of justice, guilty." Martha showed no emotion, just stared straight ahead. Judge Hendricks set sentencing for the following week. When they returned for sentencing, the courtroom was quiet. No media circus this time, just the families, the lawyers, and justice. Judge Hendricks looked at Martha with something like pity mixed with disgust. "Martha Lowell, you committed a heinous crime and showed no remorse. You nearly murdered an innocent woman, destroyed a family, and lived with that secret for 24 years. The fact that you suffer from mental illness does not absolve you. You knew what you were doing was wrong, and you did it anyway." She paused. "I sentence you to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 20 years. May you use that time to reflect on the lives you destroyed, including your own." Martha was led away as she passed their row. She looked at Isabella one last time. No hatred now, just emptiness. Outside, Robert held Isabella while she cried. Not from sadness, but relief. It was finally over. Claire stood apart, watching her parents, and felt something shift inside her. The weight she'd carried for 23 years, the poverty, the fear, the responsibility, was finally lifting. They were free, all of them. 6 months after the trial, Claire stood in the garden of the Hale mansion and watched her mother plant roses. Isabella looked nothing like the frail woman who'd nearly died in that shabby apartment. Her hair, now professionally styled, had regained some of its dark luster. Her face had filled out, the gauntness replaced by healthy color. She moved with ease, laughing as she dug into the soil with gloved hands. She looked alive. "Your mother's turning into quite the gardener," Robert said, appearing beside Claire with 2 glasses of lemonade. "She's already planning an entire section for vegetables. Says she wants to grow our own tomatoes. Claire smiled. She's always loved plants. We just never had space before, or energy. Well, now she has both. Robert handed her a glass. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Tomorrow. The word carried weight. Tomorrow was Claire's first day at UCSF Medical School. After a year of community college and intense preparation, she'd been accepted into one of the best programs in the country. Terrified, Claire admitted. Excited, mostly terrified. You're going to be brilliant, you know that, right? Robert squeezed her shoulder. You've already survived more than most people face in a lifetime. Medical school will be a cakewalk compared to what you've been through. I don't know about that. I do. His voice was firm. You're the strongest person I know, Claire. You took care of your mother for years with no resources, no help, and never once gave up. That's the kind of doctor patients need. Someone who understands struggle, someone who won't quit. Claire felt tears threaten, even after a year of living together, of building their father-daughter relationship piece by piece. Moments like this still overwhelmed her. Having someone believe in her, having someone proud of her. Thanks, Dad. The word still felt new on her tongue, but less foreign than it used to. Robert pulled her into a hug, and Claire let herself be held. Let herself feel safe in a way she'd never been able to before. Come on, Isabella called from the garden. You two need to see these roses. They're going to be stunning when they bloom. They joined her, and for the next hour, the three of them worked together in the garden, planting, weeding, planning where the tomatoes would go. It was domestic and simple and absolutely perfect. This was what they'd been robbed of 24 years ago. Not grand gestures or dramatic reunions. Just this, ordinary moments of being a family that evening. Robert gathered them in the library. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he was about to announce something important. I've been thinking, he began, settling into his favorite leather chair, about the foundation we discussed 3 months ago. Robert had proposed creating a charitable foundation to help families like theirs. People who fell through the cracks of the healthcare system, who couldn't afford treatment, who suffered because poverty meant their lives were worth less. I've finalized the paperwork, Robert continued. The Claire Isabella Foundation will officially launch next month. We'll provide medical grants to low-income families, fund research into amnesia and traumatic brain injury treatment, and support programs that help locate missing persons with memory loss. Isabella's hand went to her mouth. Robert, it's already done. I've seeded it with $50 million to start, but I want both of you involved. Not just as names on the letterhead, but as active participants, Claire. I know you'll be busy with school, but maybe during summers you could help evaluate grant applications. Isabella, I'd like you to be the public face, sharing your story, giving hope to other families. I don't know if I'm ready to be that public, Isabella started. You don't have to decide now, just think about it. Robert leaned forward. But I want people to know that recovery is possible. That even after 24 years of loss, families can be rebuilt. You're proof of that. We're proof of that. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest. We could actually help people. Really help them. That's the idea. No one should have to watch their mother die because they can't afford treatment. No one should have to choose between rent and medication. Not when people like me exist, sitting on more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Robert's voice was passionate now, more animated than Claire had ever seen him. I built an empire. But for what? To buy bigger houses? Fancier cars? That's meaningless. This, he gestured to include both of them. This is what matters, family. Helping others. Making sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. Isabella crossed to him and took his hands. It's perfect. And yes, I'll do it. I'll share our story if it helps even one family stay together. I'm in too, Claire said. Whatever you need. Robert pulled them both close, and Claire felt the rightness of this moment. They'd been torn apart by obsession and violence, but they'd come back together stronger, and now they'd use that strength to help others. The wedding took place on a Saturday in June, exactly 1 year after Robert and Isabella had reunited in that shabby apartment. It was small and intimate, just close friends, and the few family members Isabella had managed to reconnect with over the past year. Eduardo was there looking proud in a new suit. Dr. Morrison attended with his wife. Sarah Chen came with her partner. Even Marcus the driver got an invitation. because he'd become more family than employee over the months. The ceremony was in the garden. Isabella had transformed into something magical. Roses bloomed everywhere. Pink, red, white, yellow. A simple arch stood at the end of a white runner, and chairs were arranged in neat rows. Claire stood as maid of honor, wearing a blue dress that Isabella had helped her pick out. She watched her parents approach the arch from opposite directions. Their eyes locked on each other. Isabella wore a simple cream dress, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair was pulled back with fresh flowers, and she carried a small bouquet of roses from her own garden. Robert wore a dark suit, but he ditched the tie at the last minute. "Too formal," he'd said. "This is about love, not business." The officiant, a friend of Robert's from college, kept the ceremony brief and heartfelt. "Robert and Isabella's story," he began, "is one of the most remarkable I've ever heard. 24 years apart, a lifetime of pain and loss. But through it all, their love survived. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. True love doesn't die just because circumstances tear it apart. True love waits. True love endures. True love finds a way back." He turned to Robert. "Do you take Isabella to be your wife, to love and cherish, in sickness and health, for all the days of your life?" "I do." Robert's voice was thick with emotion. "I've been waiting 24 years to say that. I do, absolutely forever." "And Isabella, do you take Robert to be your husband?" "I do." Isabella was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "I never stopped being his, not for a single day, even when I couldn't remember. My heart knew. It always knew." Robert pulled the silver ring from his pocket, the ring that had brought them all together, that had survived tragedy and time and impossible odds. He slipped it onto Isabella's finger where it belonged. "With this ring," he said, voice breaking, "I thee wed, again, finally, forever." Isabella touched his face. Forever. They kissed while everyone cheered, and Claire felt her own tears fall. This was what healing looked like. This was what justice made possible. This was love. Real, complicated, miraculous love, winning against impossible odds. 3 years later, Claire sat in a small office at San Francisco General Hospital during her residency. She'd just finished a brutal 30-hour shift and was about to head home when a nurse knocked on her door. "Dr. Dawson, there's a patient in the ER. Young guy, maybe late 20s, car accident. He's conscious but confused. Says he doesn't remember anything. Not his name. Where he's from? Nothing. But he was clutching this when they brought him in." The nurse handed Claire a photograph, creased and water-damaged but still visible. A young woman with dark hair, smiling at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, "Sarah, I'll love you forever." Claire felt her heart skip. She knew this story. She'd lived this story. "Does he have any ID?" Nothing, no wallet, no phone, just the photo. Claire stood, exhaustion forgotten. "I'll take the case and get me a social worker. If this is what I think it is, we need to start searching missing persons databases immediately, especially women named Sarah who disappeared around the time of major accidents." The nurse looked confused. "How do you know?" "Because I know what it's like to be the person searching. And I know how much it matters when someone doesn't give up." Claire grabbed her white coat. "Let's find his Sarah, before another 24 years get stolen." She walked toward the ER with purpose. Her mother's ring, the replica Robert had made for her, glinting on her finger, a reminder of where she came from, of what was possible when people refused to stop fighting. Some families were torn apart by tragedy, but some found their way back, and now it was Claire's job to help make that happen for others. She'd become the doctor her family needed all those years ago, the one who wouldn't give up, the one who understood that every patient had a story, and every story mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Dinner Sunday. Your mother's making lasagna. She says you're too thin." Claire smiled and typed back. "I'll be there. Tell Mom I'm eating fine. See you Sunday. Love you both. Love you both." Words she'd never thought she'd get to say. She pocketed her phone and pushed through the ER doors, ready to help the next person whose story needed a miracle. Because miracles were real. She was living proof. And sometimes, they started with something as simple as a silver ring and a Tuesday morning in a cafe.